And CBS News chief legal correspondent Jan Crawford is there, joining me now from Washington with more here. And Jan, we heard the foundations of the two arguments in your piece, but the president tweeted this morning in part that he believes the outcome should be obvious. If nothing else, how fair and accurate is that descriptive in your opinion?
Well, I mean, I think if you look at the legal arguments, the government's got a really good case. I mean, historically, courts have deferred to the executive branch, to the president, when it comes to matters of national security. That's because of, laws passed by Congress and presidential powers that are kind of outlined in the Constitution. So if you look at as a matter of immigration law, the president typically has this wide-ranging power on national security, on the ability to deny foreigners entry into the United States. But this is a little different because this court, and we saw this in these arguments, is looking at a lot of the stuff that Mr. Trump said during the campaign and wanting to know what his motives really are. I mean, that's a pretty unusual thing to see when you're looking at presidential decisions on national security matters. It would be highly unusual, I think, for him to lose this, but he might. And I think that's also because the Ninth Circuit is considered one of the most liberal courts in the country. I don't think it's any accident that this lawsuit was filed in Washington State, which is within the Ninth Circuit. This is a very favorable forum for opponents of the president's travel ban. But it's not the end of the case. I mean, this will eventually, I think, make its way to the Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court is divided 4-4. So at some point, it may be that whatever an appeals court decides is going to carry the day. But there have been conflicting rulings now. A court in Boston upheld the ban in a very detailed opinion that I think is actually pretty persuasive, were it not for all the other stuff that surrounds Mr. Trump and all of his past statements.
But it does seem perhaps that all the other stuff, to your point, is what in part is being considered here. And if we are looking then at campaign rhetoric, I also wonder, just in the tweet I just mentioned this morning, he went on to write, and I quote, that the American people will never have the security and safety to which we are entitled, end quote.
Now, that's a little extreme. That's a little extreme.
And so is there a risk here in given that rhetoric is on the table? It seems to be adding fuel to a fire here.
Right. And I mean, obviously, you know as well as I do, people like to work the refs. And I mean, that's true in football, and it's true in legal arguments. But I mean, what I think Mr. Trump is saying this morning is that we'll never have the safety and security if the administration loses this case. It kind of misses over the point that he could just issue a different, slightly worded travel ban that might be a better rollout. And then, that would start this whole process again. So if they have specific concerns about one aspect of this ban, then he could issue another one. I mean, that's within his powers as the executive. But I also think what was really interesting was something we saw yesterday from the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kelly, who testified before Congress that, he believed that this was important and that, the rollout kind of chaos was on him. And he said something about how it is his role. I mean, what he does is to protect the American people. Courts have all these academic arguments and stuff, he testified, but my job is to protect them. And I mean, it was pretty powerful stuff. So, whatever the Ninth Circuit rules, that's not the end of this issue.
Now, so to that point, just so everybody does understand, it does seem, regardless of the Ninth Circuit's ruling, this is but a layover stop on the way to the Supreme Court. But given the makeup of the Supreme Court at present, what significance will this decision actually have?
Well, I mean, it would be on the way to the Supreme Court either in this case or another case. I mean, they may make, the government jump through another procedural hurdle here before they actually could go to the Supreme Court. That's unclear. But that is the Supreme Court. As you know, that seat, which has been vacant since the death of Justice Antonin Scalia, is going to be pivotal because for the administration to prevail, they are going to have to get 5 votes. And that court is now divided with 4 liberals, 4 conservatives. How they're going to peel off a liberal, maybe say Justice Breyer, I think is going to be tough in light of some of his past statements, some of his tweets, separately, of course, from if you just look at their arguments, their legal arguments and past precedent. I mean, if you look at that, it's a pretty good case for the administration, but separating some of that from the past statements is difficult for courts who might want to rule against Mr. Trump anyway.
And again, if it did fall on ideological lines there in the Supreme Court, the decision of the Ninth Circuit would be upheld. Chaos, it seems, looms on the horizon regardless here, one way or another. Jan Crawford in Washington, as always, we appreciate the time and insight.
Thanks, Josh.